Hey YouTube, it's Dimitri, and today we're going to talk about compensation of fancy quant. So that's me, for those of you that don't watch this channel. We're not going to talk about, I don't know, the exact numbers of what I make, but we're going to look at a few different compensation aspects, theories, and things that tie into it. I'm going to talk a little bit about YouTube, because many of you kind of wonder about that, right? Like, oh, you must be making all this money. You got 10,000 subscribers. You're huge. You're on YouTube. You're talking at conferences, right? How does that play into your compensation? And then we'll talk a little bit about day jobs, money, and happiness. But let's just dive on in. Okay, so let's just start off with YouTube here. So YouTube is vastly underpaying a lot of people, but I don't really believe that. You make far less than you would assume. So what do I mean by this? YouTube is an area where the more traffic you drive, the more people that want to pay for your marketing. So of course, somebody who's huge like PewDiePie or I don't know, Casey Neistat, for example. So I follow Casey Neistat. You make a lot more money because you have a lot of different angles and deals coming into this. So for Casey, right, you have your YouTube revenue. Then if you do sponsored videos, for example, or you have affiliate marketing, for example, you make a lot more money. For a small channel like mine, though, at 10,000 subscribers, which has taken me, I think, like 5 years to get here. All right, so I make about $120 a month. If you break that down per week, that's $30 per week, which seems great. But trust me, it's not that much. To run a channel, so a lot of my channel things tie into comments, responses, and all that. Right now, I'm spending between 1 and 2 hours per day just responding to comments on YouTube and answering people's questions on LinkedIn. So for a general week with production, shooting, editing, coming home after work, answering questions, all that stuff, it takes me about 30 hours per week. So you figure out the math here, $30 a week, 30 hours worked per week, I make $1 an hour. So that's not very good. And you think, well, I mean, it's kind of a fun hobby, which is definitely true, which is why I continue to do it. But then you have to realize too, taxes also come in. So taxes will take out at least 25-ish%. So you take off 25% of that, right? Making 75 cents an hour. YouTube's just not a really big money-making venue for many people. Now, you can leverage this up and make really good earnings off of it, so I would love to be able to get to that point someday. But one of the key issues that my channel has, for example, is I don't have sponsors. So who's going to sponsor a quantitative finance YouTube video, right? I mean, think about it, right? I've had a trading firm that wanted to do it, so I've had one, but a lot of people don't really want to sponsor it. Like the book publishers, for example, are making tons of money off of academic institutions and selling textbooks. I don't know who else would sponsor me, like a pencil company, an eraser company, I don't know, right? You could find something, I'm sure. But then the other issue I have, which comes down to the morals and ethics of my channel and my goals, is I don't want to pitch something to you that I don't believe in. And so, for example, let's say a company that, I don't know, has an investing product or software, for example, they want to sponsor me. I feel like if I get paid for the sponsorship, that's one business decision. But also, I don't want to pitch something to you that I don't really believe in. So, right, balancing that is challenging on its own. And the main source of income outside of YouTube is that I use Amazon affiliates. So for those of you that look at my book reviews, there's little links, and I usually type in there like, this is my affiliate link. The way Amazon affiliate works is that you click the link, you pay the same price, but Amazon just gives me a little bit of a payment saying, hey, thanks for driving traffic to our website. I make, I think, a whole whopping like $10 on a good month on these revenues, these affiliate marketing things. So it's not really that much money. People have mentioned, Dimitri, why don't you hire people to help you? Okay, well, I'm working for 75 cents. If I split that halfway, pay you 35, 40 cents, right? People aren't going to do it. So it's just as simple as that. Also, I don't feel like I can outsource much of the channel for the statement of much of what I respond and post, I think, is a very personal perspective, which takes expertise from where I'm at in my career and what I've done in my education. Even bringing someone in to help. For example, they can't really answer your questions, and people that message me want my perspective and my opinions, not somebody else's, like an intern or a helper or something. So that's not an option. And then I'm so particular about what I publish, what I post, what I say. If I say something in a video and I don't feel it's the best thing to say for a variety of reasons. I'll end up cutting stuff out. But again, that comes down to my personal perspective, so editing is a little bit challenging. So on the social media side, right, this is why you don't see a lot of quants helping and doing all this stuff and doing YouTube channels and things like this. There's just not a lot of money in it. You just do it for the fun. All right, and now the second piece here, which most of you are probably wondering, quant compensation. So I've made a video on everyone's not making millions of dollars. Right, I posted stuff from Glassdoor, for example, and you can look on there. Glassdoor is by far the best tool you can get for looking at salaries. It is self-reported of a variety of people from most companies. You will see these Wall Streety salaries that everyone's like, I don't know, convinced that everyone's making $10 million their first year. These don't exist, but there is really good money to be made if you enjoy the work and if you are good at the work. I can tell you, if you are driven by money and you think I'm going to make a lot of money and I want to be rich and I want to be famous and like I think I'm the best person out there and I want to beat my friends and all this stuff, you probably should go see a psychologist, just to be blunt and honest with you, right? Money does not make you happy. So I'll cover why I've went the route I did career-wise and talk about that. But when you make money, so I'm going to cover a little bit of article here and a little bit of academic studies. There's an article in the past that I remember reading on if you make $70,000 per year, you will be essentially fairly happy. So I went through the article again. They've made some updates. I think Purdue's added some research to it. And it talks about, they've confirmed past studies that found around $70,000 was an ideal income for providing day-to-day happiness in the United States, but it also expanded the work globally using data from the Gallup World Poll. If you go on to read further, though, it talks about, in Canada and the United States, the optimal level of satisfaction in life, so if your goal is to be happy, is $105,000. If you make more than that, you will be slightly less happy. If you make less than that, you will be less happy. And I completely agree with this research, A, because it's done academically, but B, I've had a very similar, personal experience that really ties to this. So for most quants, right, you're going to be starting out anywhere between usually 70 and 100, depending where you live city-wise. If you live in New York or Silicon Valley, for example, you're going to need to make at least around the $100,000 mark to really get in there. But when you start making, so this talks about too that 70,000 is only for the individual, not the household. I think though, realistically, from my perspective of living like in an average US city, so not one of these super expensive ones, making 70,000 to 100,000 for a household income is very comfortable. You have enough money to essentially pay off student loans and student debt. You have enough money to pay your rent. You have enough money to buy a car or to pay for your car or maintain your car. You have enough money to go on vacations. You have enough money to buy clothes. No, you're not going to be living in like the upper echelons of society and be, driving a Bentley and, complaining that your parents didn't buy you a BMW with heated seats or whatnot, right? Yes, I see these people around the industry. But the point here is that there gets to be a point where you have enough money that more money doesn't necessarily bring you happiness. And in many cases, making more money is going to make you less happy. So I've made decent money in my quant career. I've made over 100,000 for some time now. I live extremely comfortably. So I don't really have any financial stresses or burdens or worries. When I started my career, as in, for example, my education and college and all that, I was poorer than poor. I essentially had nothing. So back then, I would manage all my financials on Excel sheets. And every single month, I would go through and categorize everything by hand. Wouldn't use any software. And I would look and see, and I'd chart out how much I've been spending for food every month. Like, why am I $10 high this month? And how do you cut that? And I talk to my wife and say, I can't buy meat next month. There's no way it's going to fit in the budget. So we're scheduling things out and laying out very detailed things. I am super, super cheap because I've started so poor. I've stuck with it. So for me, again, my average number of living is probably even lower than most people in general in the US. But it was at the point where micromanaging and maintaining your finances was challenging, but it was doable. And then getting that first quant job, it's comfortable, guys. You're not going to be a millionaire, but you are very, very comfortable. The other point, though, is that the more you make, a lot of times there's additional stresses with the job that add up. And I've gotten to the point where I live so comfortably that I don't have to manage my financials like that. I don't manage day to day, like, looking at my monthly reports and everything and figuring out how much I spent. I can just comfortably just buy stuff. Okay. I definitely keep an eye on my financials. I have a whole system on how I manage my financials, but it takes me a lot less time because I don't really need to manage it that much. So making tons and tons of money sounds great. It sounds awesome, right? It'd be awesome to make $1 million, but a lot of you just don't realize the amount of work, sacrifices, and effort and life that it takes to get to that point. And as I pointed out in the other video, most people that are making, we'll just say $500,000 or more, you're in management, okay? You're a manager of some sorts. If you want to make $1 million, you're going to be an executive of some sorts. It's not very common, and I'm sure there are cases out there, especially in the past. I'm sure there are a few cases today as well, where you're making over $1 million and you're a quant, maybe you're a trader, maybe you do something like this. But the vast majority and the realistic reality is you're not going to make that. If you do, you end up in a management role, and as a manager, you're not the guy crunching out code all day doing math and stats, which is really what quants do. You're more or less a manager. So again, if you look around the industry, you look around every industry globally, how much do executives make? A whole lot more. How much stress do they have? Crazy amounts, right? It's no fun. You make tons of sacrifices to do it. So compensation-wise, though, for quants, I think it's important to realize that it's a valid career if you enjoy doing it. The people that do not enjoy doing it do not do well in the industry. You don't progress. So a lot of the people I mentioned before, where you're super focused on money and you have to make more money and you have to be better than everybody else, and you have this very narcissistic personality and trait, which is very damaging for your happiness, your health, your career. Like, you're not really going to progress that far, because what ends up happening is you don't work well with a team. You won't get into management roles, and that's where the money is for most people. Even as a quant trader now, as I've mentioned in the past, trading used to be like this very individualistic sport, more or less. Of course, there's people supporting you, but as we've moved forward in time and quant finance has taken over, the team mentality has been very pushed, because you need the expert computer scientist, you need the expert mathematician, statistician, right? You need the managers, you need all these different hardware people to set up systems, right? You have to have a team. So being able to work with people is very important. All right, so I'm going to briefly touch on here the money part here. So for me, I was a finance student when I started my undergrad. I wanted to make decent amounts of money, right? I've always wanted to be somewhat of an executive, but this comes from a very, I think, rational perspective, at least from my eyes, of course, because it's my perspective. But I always tie monetary gains and wealth with freedom. So for me, the big goal that I have in a life, and what drives me a lot of times, besides like educational curiosities, is also the fact that I want to maximize my freedoms. I want to be able to go where I want. I want to be able to take the vacations I want. I want to have the family that I want. I want to have the nice house that I have, right? I want to be in a position where I have freedoms to do what I want without being constrained and restricted. As I've mentioned before, when you start getting up into most average quant salaries, it's enough to do all that. It doesn't really provide me any advantage if I made what I made today or I made $1 million. Yes, I would have more money to work on investments and perhaps side projects and start businesses and do other cool things, which again are all different types of freedoms. But realistically, if you start defining your goal and why you want the money, you'll start figuring out why you're really doing it and where you want to work at. Of course, a lot of people say, I just want the money to have the money. I can tell you I make great money now. I have extra money, right? I do it for investing in other different activities. But at the end of the day, right, it doesn't really make me happy. And a lot of times I feel somewhat terrible inside, because I feel like, oh, I'm kind of bored, right? I'm stressed out. I'm working all these YouTube channels. I'm working all of my normal job, right? I need to get a hobby. I need to relax. So I'll go out and I'll buy some stuff. Like, all right, I'm going to buy stuff to be a woodworker, which many of you know I've been doing, and I enjoy it. But a lot of times it gets stressful, and it's like, oh, I bought all this stuff and I did it. Right? I'm kind of empty on the inside. Like, I need something else. So then you go out and you buy a bunch of textbooks. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to read all these textbooks. I have not gotten around to reading the vast majority of textbooks I have. I have books on physics from Richard Feynman. I have books on volcanoes in Hawaii from a geologist, scientific book. I have books on honeybees. I have math books, data science books, stats books. I have all these books that I want to read, but I just haven't had the time. And then, of course, I just like, well, if I buy this book, it looks interesting, I'll buy another book, I'll buy another book. It doesn't make you happy, okay? I'm going to state that clearly here. So the more money I make, a lot of times I'm not necessarily getting happier. I think my happiness is slightly going down somewhat because there's just more stress tied to it. There's more work you have to do. YouTube's a perfect example of this, right? It's a hobby. It kind of makes a little money. The money for me kind of keeps me in the game and judging where I'm at. But realistically, the days that I focus on the videos and the content, and people are messaging me saying, Dimitri, this video is awesome. I interviewed for a job and I landed the job. That's the thing that makes me happy and keeps me going for the most part. Seeing my little piddly $120, yeah, it's nice to have something to kind of like justify buying, new equipment. So I don't know if you can see in the background here, there's a box. I bought like a new stand for shooting video and whatnot on. But the more you make, it's great. There's things you can do with it. Don't get me wrong. But at the same time, I think these articles and research are somewhat indicating that you're not necessarily needing to make that much money to really be happy. And from my perspective, adding my 2 cents on here is you can do a lot of what you want to do in life: vacations, friends, family, put kids through school, retire and have a great career as a quantitative finance professional, right? I live in a nice house. It's 4-bed, 3-bath, 2,800 square feet. But again, I'm not stating I'm the wealthiest person. I'm not stating I have the biggest house or the biggest, best, nicest cars and all this junk. It doesn't really matter. And I think that's what I want to push people is realize if you enjoy quantitative finance and you really enjoy what you're doing and you enjoy the process, the money will just come naturally because you're good at what you do and you enjoy it. If you just do it because you want to make money, it doesn't turn out well for you. I can tell you. I've seen this over and over again. A lot of people have come to me over the years talking about wanting to make all this money. They eventually break into the industry. Maybe I've worked with them. Maybe I just have contacted them and they end up unhappy and they either leave the industry, which I've seen happen, or they just work this miserable job and they just stay at a general position and they're upset and dislike everybody around them because they just don't like the job. And then to wrap this up here quickly for the US here. So I think this is something important to note. As I mentioned, right, I'm not super wealthy. I'm not super rich. I'm not the crazy person on the top, and I'm fine with that. At the same time, though, you need to stop comparing yourself a lot of time to these fairy tale numbers that you see online and people start making up. Sure, there are some real ones out there, but I can tell you most of the stuff you see online are undergrad people in finance who have heard stories of stories of stories, and most of the stories are probably coming from the 80s and 90s. And even a lot of those stories aren't true. They're just things that kind of get blown out of proportion. But let's look at the distribution of annual household income in the United States. So I will note this is household income. So most households have 2 people. Some do not. But if you look here on this histogram, you'll see it starts at under 5,000 per year. That is dismal. That's just a really bad spot to be in. If you're in that, I'm sorry. Quant Finance could help you if you find it interesting. If you make the investment, it's worth it to get the education and everything. And I'll note here too, the median household income was roughly $50,000. The top 25% of reported income greater than $85,000. Here's in the middle. So as I mentioned, quants start between 70 and 100. Many of you are going to start off making essentially the top 25% of people in the United States. So count your blessings here. It's a really good opportunity. It's really comfortable living, as I've mentioned, right? We're not going here to be a millionaire, right? Not promising you all false hopes. And then as you move up the chain here, it says the top 10% report income greater than 135. That's pretty easy to hit from a quant finance perspective, especially if you start pushing more towards the management side. So just general management. And then this chart actually caps out the last 2 bars here. So it's 200 to 250. And then the last one is 250 and over. That's approximately 4% of households. So if you would like to shoot for something in a career making more than 250, that's doable. It's a lot of work, but it's doable from a quant finance perspective here. You're in the top 4% of people in the US. So I'm hoping this chart really gives you more perspective on, you need to look at the entire picture here. Especially those that just start a job. A lot of times you start on the bottom of the totem pole, right? You come out as a student. And then you expect somehow you're going to make these top earning numbers right off the bat here. And again, management, working that route, making a bigger impact on your business, right? The more you contribute, the more you'll make. It's possible to make good money. Again, you can look all this up online, right? You just go on Glassdoor, look up director titles for different banks. You can see about what the average comp is. But I'm hoping you guys get a better perspective on compensation. I hope a lot of you realize that if you enjoy the work, it's an awesome career. If you don't enjoy the work, it's going to be miserable no matter what. Yes, people have contacted me thinking they're going to make like, I don't know, $300, $400, $500,000. And their friend told them this is definitely going to happen because they knew a guy that knew a guy. Sure, it's possible. Anything's possible in life. But again, there are a lot of factors in that. How many degrees do you have? How much work experience do you have? What firm are you working at? How have you networked? How many academic papers have you published? How many years of experience? Right? There's all these things that kind of play into it. What city are you living in? So living in New York City versus living in, I don't know, Seattle versus living in Chicago versus living in Dallas versus living in, I don't know, Minneapolis, right? It's all going to be different depending where you live and your cost of living. But takeaway from this video is quants will make pretty good money in general in the long run. It's a very comfortable lifestyle. Again, if you want to work in the upper parts though, you'll be very stressed for the most part. It's not all fun and games. And like, I don't know, as I mentioned in other videos, you don't work with just super brilliant people in life, super easy and going, and I don't know, they're stressed. They're stressed in everything. The more you make, the harder you work. So anyways, thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Check out my merchandise below this video as well. And as always, until next time.